views, opinions, and content of the show are those of the host, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect those of Local Matters Broadcasting LLC, its owners, partners, affiliates, assigns, or heirs. Having said that, it's now time to say good morning, St. Johns County. Welcome to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging, better known in our community as the COA. We are your local nonprofit agency who for the past 51 years has been leading and advocating for the dignity, independence, health, and community involvement of older St. Johns County residents. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, broadcasting to you live from the studio of WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. Before we get into our show, let me remind everyone that if you have a question, comment, or a suggestion for a radio show topic, or if you just want to send an email to say how much you love the show, you can email us at radio@coasjc.org. Again, that's radio@coasjc.org. And if you have a question during this morning's show that you want to send our way, we'll try to work it in. So send that question to radio@coasjc.org. Joining me this morning is Andrea Spencer, Vice President of Communications with ElderSource. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, and thank you for making the long drive down here to be with us so early in the morning. So what I'd like to do in our first segment is I just would love for our listeners to learn about you. And so if you would take a few minutes, tell our listeners about yourself. How did you end up at ElderSource, and what do you do in your role with the organization?
Well, I am Andrea Spencer, Vice President of Communications at ElderSource, and I've been there 14 years. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, way back when, but I've lived in Florida now since 1984. So I have had a long career in public relations and marketing and worked for various nonprofits and government and PR agencies. But I'll tell you, the work that I'm doing here at ElderSource over the last 14 years is just really satisfying. It's varied, it's challenging, and of course now with our aging population, there's so many different and interesting things you can do to try to communicate to older adults where they can go for help. So that is my primary job at ElderSource, is to help people understand that when they're sitting at their kitchen table and they've got some papers in front of them and they don't really know where to start for help, that our helpline is the place to do that. So we do a number of things: community outreach, presentations. I have a modest marketing budget where we promote certain programs, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But our goal is to help people understand that they're not alone, that caregivers have some resources available to them, whether it's through us or working with partnerships like the Councils on Aging in our 7-county service area that they can turn to for help.
Well, you mentioned Buffalo, and I automatically go to your Buffalo Bills, and
yes.
I feel so bad that they have yet to win a Super Bowl.
Oh,
they
man.
keep getting so close, don't they?
They do. They do. Josh Allen is a hero in that town, but every time I mention that I'm from that area, they're like, oh, the snow. And like, yep, I was in high school in 77, 78, and they've never been able to shake that reputation of, have that snow belt. And my sister still lives up there, and we trade calls and check on the weather, and usually she doesn't want to know what the temperature is down here, and I really don't want to know what the temperature is up there.
Yes. Well, I'm originally from Weirton, West Virginia, which is very close to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I know all about the snow. Not to the extent that you did from living in Buffalo. My daughter, though, lives in Cleveland. My oldest lives in Cleveland, and so she gets a lot of that lake effect snow.
Yep,
right?
yep. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, those two cities, I think they're amazing with, opportunities and culture. And, you probably have heard that Cleveland is called the mistake on the lake. But I definitely would never, it's a great city, as is Buffalo.
It really is. Now, I don't want to say too much about it because, Cleveland is a rival of the Pittsburgh Steelers,
yes,
right? So
yes.
I can't talk
That's true.
Cleveland up too much, but anyways, okay. Well, thank you for that. I just love to let our listeners get to know you a little bit.
Thanks.
How you ended up in Florida and at your organization. So we have a few minutes before we take our first break, so we might get interrupted by a commercial break. But if you would just start taking some time and educate our listeners about ElderSource what do you do? How do you partner with St. Johns County Council on Aging to serve the seniors of our county?
Yes. So ElderSource is a nonprofit. We are funded by state and federal dollars, and we cover a 7-county service area. There are actually 11 area agencies on aging and aging and disability resource centers in Florida. And for that matter, there's over 600 and some throughout the United States. So we are connected because we are funded by the Older Americans Act. So if you have an aunt that lives in Denver and they say, oh, is there an ElderSource in Denver? And I would say not necessarily an ElderSource, but you would find your area agency on aging. So our primary responsibility, our mission, is to help people live and age with independence and dignity in their home and community. And that word independence, I think, is so important and so strong that people, as they age, resonate with, you know what, I want to stay in my home. Don't take away my car keys. So we have a number of programs, and we work in concert with our partner agencies like the St. Johns County Council on Aging to ensure that people have hopefully what they need to remain in their homes and live as independently as possible. So when we talk about the work that we do, the programs and services do come together, and that all starts with our helpline. Our helpline, which is 1-888-242-4464, and we get about 5,000 calls a month. And people call us for all different kinds of reasons. It's a caregiver looking for support programs. It's somebody who's just turned 65 and they don't understand how to apply for their Medicare benefits. And people who are looking for all different kinds of assistance. They might want to apply for food stamps. They might need rent assistance. We are the portal for people to enter the Medicaid-managed long-term care, which means those in-home services, which, again, help you stay independent and living in your home. So they start with us, and our tagline is, start here for help. But one of the things that we're really trying to promote is, no matter where you are here in Florida, that the area agencies on aging are a wealth of information and support for older adults. And when you look at our clients or the people that we serve, it's people ages 60 and over, persons with disabilities, because we are an aging and disability resource center, and their caregivers. So those caregivers have a very challenging job of supporting the people that they love. So those are the people that call us, and I can't tell you how many times I'm at a community event and they see the big name ElderSource across the tablecloth. They say, oh, I'm not old enough for you. And I said, well, are you caring for somebody? And they'll stop truly in their tracks and say, yeah, my mom's 80-something. I said, well, we might have something that helps and supports you as well. So we really do our best to make sure that people are aware of who we are, what we do, and, of course, all the roles and the vital importance that the area agencies on aging do in their communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to dive deeper into all the different programs that ElderSource offers as we move forward with our show. But right now, we're going to go ahead and take our first commercial break, and we'll be right back after these messages. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, joined this morning by Andrea Spencer, Vice President of Communications with ElderSource. And prior to our commercial break, you were talking a little bit about the different things that ElderSource does. And so I just wanted to start to dive a little bit deeper into some of your programs. So on your website, myeldersource.org, there's a variety of services that ElderSource provides to the community. And so let's talk about some of these, beginning with your caregiver support programs. And I saw two of them listed, and maybe there's more, but there's one called T-Care and then Virtual Caregiver Support Group. So take some time and talk about those, because I know there's a lot of caregivers that are out there. And like you mentioned, and we serve those 60 and older, but as far as caregivers, it's 18 or older. You can be 18 or older taking care of somebody, and you can be a part of our caregiver support groups. And that's important, because I remember my wife and we took care of her parents for about 3 years before they both passed away. And caregiving is exhausting. And so I'm so thankful that we have the programs that we have and then the programs that you have. So if you would, go ahead and talk about those.
Well, as you had mentioned, caregiving is a journey, and it's also a challenge, but it also can be a joyful journey of this time that you have with your loved one to give them the best care that they can. But caregiver burnout is real. there's that little phrase that says you can't pour from an empty cup. So you can't give of yourself if you are completely drained. So we are completely aware of that at ElderSource. And one of the programs that we have that is funded by generous grant from the Humana Foundation, it's called T-Care, which is Tailored Care Assessment and Referral Program. Somebody would call our helpline. They may call for whatever reason, and all of a sudden one of our customer service specialists understands that they're caring for somebody and that person might be needing some care themselves. So we would refer them to this program, which essentially does an assessment of, where their stressors are and trying to understand, okay, what are those triggers that are causing you to get into that burnout zone? And the purpose of it is to avoid burnout. So that assessment is done, and then we work with them to give them resources and support to hopefully avoid that burnout. And it might be recommendations and connections to maybe some mental health support. It might be giving them information about respite care and what they can do to give themselves a break, as well as keeping their loved one engaged. So T-Care has been very, very successful over the last several years that we've had it. And I want to say that last year alone that we had helped over 200 people in that program. So thankfully through that grant, it continues. And that is something that is not funded by state and federal dollars, and that's why we do a bit of fundraising, and that's why we look to foundations for grants that support it. So knowing that, there are other things that we have done in our organization, and the other one is the Virtual Caregiver Support Group, which we actually started before the pandemic. It was probably that summer before of 2019, and it took off modestly, but it is really, over the last 5 years, we've had a number of people in that support group, and it meets weekly for 60 to 90 minutes, and and it's virtual, so it's not an in-person group. And as you know, sometimes with caregivers, it's very difficult for them to break away. Finding respite care can be challenging. It can be expensive. So here, you can sit at your kitchen table with your laptop, with your smartphone, and be able to connect with caregivers who are walking the same walk. I mean, isn't it refreshing to know that you're not alone?
Absolutely.
So they tell jokes, they tell stories, they share resources, they cry. So people float in and out of the support group. Some people pass, their loved one passes away and then they don't need the support group. But others, have been involved since the very beginning, and they have just found it a wealth of information. Sometimes we bring in a special guest speaker. It might be an elder law attorney to, answer those questions that you just need a little bit of that expertise. And so we bring that person or those experts to the table to support them, on their journey. So it's free. Both of these programs are free, and you can go to our website at myeldersource.org under that caregiver support drop down, and you can click on it, and it's very easy, and we will do what we can to help the caregivers, carry on.
And as far as the person that they're caring for, so I know for our caregiver support groups that we do at St. Johns County Council on Aging, is mainly focused on those who are caring for those with some form of dementia. Right?
Yes.
And so with yours, is that the same, or is it somebody that's caregiving for anybody?
Well, first I want to give kudos to your staff at the COA. Paulette, Kozlowski, her team of people, and everybody at the COA, they have tremendous expertise and support, and it's just so well run. So we are proud always to partner with you in that avenue. So yes, a lot of those programs at the Council on Aging focus on those who are living with dementia or persons diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So anybody in our programs, there's not a specific designation. They could be, diagnosed with Parkinson's or cancer, or any other sort of ailment that puts them in that caregiving role. So I think it's important to know that in that sense, there isn't any eligibility, there isn't any criteria. And as I mentioned, we cover 7 counties. So these particular programs, T-Care and the Virtual Caregiver Support Group, are done where you don't have to show up to a meeting. And you get that support, right in your own community at your own home. So on many occasions, we get those referrals from the Council on Aging to say, why don't you check out that particular T-Care program? And I think you guys also do the Savvy Savvy Caregiver, which is another tool that people use to be the best caregiver that they can be. So we are constantly referring to each other back and forth, and again, trying to connect people to the resources that that they may not even be aware of. And one of the best analogies that I've heard working at ElderSource, there was a woman who said, you think about someone who, a young mother, she becomes pregnant, and she has like kind of 9 months to get herself wrapped around the thought that I'm going to be a mom. I got to get my pediatrician lined up. I've got to get this lined up in daycare. Am I going to work? Am I going to stay at home? So you have that period of time to think about your new role. Well, guess what? With caregiving, it can happen overnight. Somebody falls, or pneumonia, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden you are juggling your young kids' soccer practices and then trying to get mom to the doctor. And then, you know what? You might also be working at the same time. And that's that sandwich generation of caregiving. So all of a sudden, and that's where it's like, I can't tell you how many times I talk to caregivers at community events. I don't even know like where to start. So with your agency, our agencies, we also have a wonderful list of resources through the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida. And I've got a great little brochure that kind of lines up, I would say, the most popular resources that somebody can tap into. Alzheimer's Association, Jacksonville Area Legal Aid, Mid-Central Florida Legal Aid, the Council on Aging. So having all these little things at your fingertips, and you don't even know when you need them or why you need them. So between the Virtual Caregiver Support Group, T-Care, the Caregiver Coalition, which is a partnership of organizations that we have a common mission of supporting caregivers. So we're working together to get you that information that you need.
Yeah, and I love how you brought out the fact that it can happen overnight, because that's exactly what happened with my wife's father. He's 62 years old and just living life, and everything was just perfect. And then one afternoon, he had a brain aneurysm rupture, and so then for the next 3 years of his life, it was taking care of him. I mean, he ended up being paralyzed on his left side of his body. 6 months after that occurred, my wife's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and so we ended up, having to take care of both of them. A lot of care was focused on her dad,
right.
Because her mom really kind of the last 6 months of her life was, where we had to provide more care for her. But for her dad, it was, an ongoing thing, and at the same time, we had 2 children that we were raising, right? So trying to take care of them. And then take care of our children, and it's exhausting, and burnout is real. And the things that you offer, we lived in West Virginia, so we were not aware of anything, right? So it was thankfully we were involved in a church that had a great group of people that would come by from time to time and give us a break so we could go out and go on a date or things like that.
Right.
So I wish we had the services, or maybe they were there and we just didn't know about it.
Right.
So
you might want to remind people about your adult day program, how that works. How do people get plugged into that? It's really, again, a huge asset in this community that the Council on Aging has those experts, those people with the skill and knowledge to give area caregivers the break. So, again, they do amazing work.
Yes, and we've had Paula Kozlowski on the show, and she's talked about the Sunshine Center and how to be involved in that. And of course, you can find more information on our website, coasjc.org. All right, so we're about to go to our next commercial break, and so we will be right back after these messages to talk about more programs offered by ElderSource. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm Brian Robson, Program Director for COA, joined this morning by Andrea Spencer, Vice President of Communications with ElderSource, and the song that you just heard is Welcome to the Jungle from Guns N' Roses. And life is, navigating life can be like a jungle, especially as we get older. And so we're talking about some of the different programs that is offered by ElderSource. In our previous segment, we talked about the caregiver support programs. And now I'd like to dive into some of the other ones that are listed on your website. And so let me just mention them all, and then we'll just kind of dive into them. You could talk a little bit about each one of them. So there's SHINE, which means Serving Health Insurance Needs of Elders. EASE, Emergency Assistance Serving Elders. Then there's Veteran-Directed Care Program, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, Suppers for Seniors, and then Sharing and Caring Closet. And so if you would, talk about each one of those.
Well, let's start with the Aging and Disability Resource Center, which basically follows our tagline, which is Start Here for Help. So all the programs that you mentioned, you can get plugged into them by starting with our helpline. So we are an Aging and Disability Resource Center, and as I mentioned a little bit ago, the people that we serve are ages 60 and over, persons with disabilities 18 and over, and the caregivers that love them and support them. So SHINE, which I know you'll be having one of our other amazing SHINE volunteers on in a couple of weeks, at serving health insurance needs of elders. So essentially, when you turn 65 or you're beginning to approach that age 65, you realize you are eligible for the Medicare benefits. So logging onto that website, the government website, and trying to sign up for your Medicare benefits can be really confusing. There's different choices, there's terms that you might not understand and how they all fit together. Well, this program is funded by the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Elder Affairs, and we have a cadre of 40-plus volunteers that are trained, background checked, and to understand all the ins and outs and nuances of the Medicare system. So you approach that age, and you start getting the phone calls from all the healthcare companies that want you to pick them, and they're great, but you know what? You want somebody to give you that free and unbiased guidance on picking what Medicare plan might be best for you. So this is what the SHINE volunteers do. They will counsel with you and sit down and say, all right, let's look and see your doctors. Are they on this plan? What does this plan offer? What's the premium? Are you eligible for any what we call extra help, where that the Social Security benefit that's taken out of your Social Security check every month, could be put back in your pocket to see if you're eligible for that. But again, the importance of it is we don't tell you what plan to pick. That really is entirely up to you. But we really figuratively, literally can take you by the hand and help you understand what is the best choice for you. It's helping you understand your insurance choices as you age. So we have, I think last year was actually, we hit a peak of helping people, helped over 4,000 counseling sessions with people looking for assistance. And again, I go back to saying it's free and it's unbiased. They're not allowed to hold an insurance license, and they're background checked and they're highly trained to keep up with all the changes in the Medicare system. So that's an amazing, again, program that people tap into, and then they call us year after year if there's a change or there's something else. An interesting aspect of that SHINE program, which one of your upcoming speakers will talk about, is Medicare fraud. There's a lot of Medicare fraud out there, and, it may not necessarily come out of your pocket, but it certainly trickles down into the system. And I always like to tell this story. It was probably about 5 years ago. I'm at a healthcare event, and across the aisle from me was a table with people wearing white coats, and they had all their official papers out on the table. And so they were encouraging people to get swabbed to see if they had a propensity for a genetic disease like cancer. So, and people are like, sure, I want to know if I might have this gene. And they swab you and they collect your Medicare information. And guess what? They literally threw those swabs in the trash. They collected your information and they billed Medicare $13,000 for that swab. So that is Medicare fraud. So, but where it affected these individuals at the health fair is in your Medicare plan, you are only allowed to have one genetic test in your Medicare plan life. So guess what? You just had it thrown away. So that is horrible. So that Senior Medicare Patrol, that's what part of the SHINE program is. So again, I encourage people to call us 888-242-4464 or go to our website, myeldersource.org, to check that out. You mentioned the Veteran-Directed Care Program, which we're very proud of. That is the opportunity for veterans to work with us to hire their own caregiver. So, and the whole purpose of this program is to keep the veteran at home. I mentioned earlier, again, like people just want to stay in their home. They want to stay in their own bed. They want to be cared for somebody that they know and they love and they trust. trust. So here, they would get a referral from their VA physician or their VA social worker, and then they would refer them to us. And what we do is we set up their payroll for that caregiver. So it could be your wife, it could be your neighbor, it could be a church friend. And you are given a budget based on your VA benefits of how much you can spend a month on paying this person. But we do the payroll. We set it up so that person turns in their timesheet to us, and we pay them then every week. So again, the whole purpose is for them to remain at home and have somebody care for them that they know and they love and they trust. So that is, again, you can call our helpline, but really it starts with the VA physician or the social worker. Mm-hmm. So right now we've got about 140, 150 veterans that we're caring for in the department. So our team are literally on the road, getting all this paperwork and everything signed up for the families. So
and I love that you keep bringing out the point that the goal is to help people stay in their homes,
yes.
right? Because you think about, like, this is where they raise their family. This is a house that they paid the mortgage on for years, right? And now they own in most cases. And so to be able to allow them that opportunity to stay in their home means a lot, right? Because there's all the memories attached with it. I think about my mother in September of 2022. She was very active, still drove, took care of her yard, but she tripped over a rug on the back porch, broke her hip. And then it was just kind of downhill from there. She passed away May of last year, but it was just a downhill slope, right? But we tried our best to keep her at home as long as we possibly could, because my dad had built that house. And she
lots
raised,
of memories.
Yeah, and she raised 5 kids in that house. So just, about 60 years worth of memories.
Right, comfort, security, just all of peace of mind, and then just peace, knowing that you are where you want to be.
Right. All right. Well, that music means we got to take our next break, and so we will be right back after these messages to talk about more programs that are offered through ElderSource. And welcome back to the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, joined this morning by Andrea Spencer, Vice President of Communications with ElderSource. And before I forget, let me just let you know that next week's guest will be Leslie Gamache, our program manager at COA. We'll talk about a lot of different things going on at our senior centers. So tune in next week, same place, same time, right here on WFOY 102.1 FM. All right, prior to our commercial break, we were talking about some of the other different programs offered through ElderSource. We talked about the Aging and Disability Resource Center, SHINE, EASE. We didn't get into EASE. We talked about Veteran Directed Care Program. So talk a little bit about EASE, and then Suppers for Seniors and Sharing and Caring Closet.
Well, EASE is a program, and it's emergency assistance serving elders. And essentially, sometimes we get calls on the helpline where people call us for one reason, and through the course of the conversation or the assessment, we understand that they're facing a very unexpected, unexplained financial crisis. And it might be that they're living in an apartment and the apartment community has been sold. And they can pay their rent, but all of a sudden the new company comes in and they're raising their rent and they have to move. So you've got that first month's rent, last month's rent, and then probably an electrical hookup, maybe moving costs. And you're like, oh, gosh darn, what am I going to do? Well, we have a very wonderful foundation, 2 foundations that support these seniors who are facing a financial crisis, from the Jim Moran Foundation and the Weavers through the Community Foundation of Northeast Florida. So we are able to help people get out of that crunch and basically carry on. The good news is we've been able to help a lot of people, but guess what? The need is always so great. So there are opportunities during the year when we have a call to action and people can donate to the EASE Fund. So amazing stories of where we've helped people with all different kinds of things. And one of my favorite stories, when I first started at ElderSource 14 years ago, and there was a woman who needed cardiac surgery, and her cardiologist would not be able to perform the surgery because she needed some serious dental work. And if you're familiar with that, there's a lot of bacteria in your mouth that can travel through your bloodstream. And he just said, I can't have you or me take that risk. So we were able to pay for her dental care so she could then have the heart surgery. Somebody broke their dentures, and all of a sudden they weren't eating well. They were isolating themselves because they were embarrassed in how they looked. So her caregiver, daughter, called us for one reason, and then again, as I said, through the course of the conversation, we learned that her mother was facing this critical time in her life. So we were able to help her with a new set of dentures. So as I mentioned, we are able to help a lot of people, but the needs are always so great. So that is what the EASE Fund is all about. Suppers for Seniors was a campaign that we started last year. There's a lot of people on the wait list for home-delivered meals or Meals on Wheels. And you know what? We're trying to figure out a way because that's funded through dollars that we have no control over. So we needed a boost. So we introduced a campaign called Suppers for Seniors, where if we raised $50,000, the Weaver Legacy Fund would match it at $50,000. So we succeeded last year, and we just decided that resonated with people. So we keep that information and need on our website as well. We're going to be introducing a new campaign this year that's going to support caregiver resources. So look out for that coming out this summer and fall. The Sharing and Caring Closet was actually an employee who, one of our helpline specialists, was getting calls about individuals who needed those consumable medical supplies. And those are, the adult incontinence supplies and the bed pads and things like that. They're very expensive, and they're not covered by Medicare. So we did a drive, we called it the Shop and Drop, where we created the Sharing and Caring Closet, and people donated these items to us, and we have them at our office, which is on Old St. Augustine Road in Mandarin. And people can come once every 3 months and get a little supply just to tide them over. It's not a store, so we do have some criteria in order to help as many people as possible. But it is an opportunity, for people who have a heart and want to donate some of these things, for other older adults and their caregivers, and for those people who need that extra little help. So we're in a point where we've got a full closet, but we don't make deliveries and we don't pick up donations. But again, you can go to our website, get more information. The 888-242-4464 will give you somebody on the helpline to see how you might get that resource, helping you as well. Yeah,
and we do something similar in our Care Connection department at St. Johns County Council on Aging, and we have some of those items as well that we offer to folks. In addition to things like dog food and cat food, because one of the things that we've discovered over the years is folks getting home delivered meals. A lot of times they were feeding part of that to their pet because they couldn't afford the pet food. So we have that available that we give to some of those folks. Every little bit helps, right? So if they're not having to buy the pet food, then they can spend that money on the groceries that they need, or their electric bill, or things like that. So everything helps. We got a few minutes left in our show, and so I wanted to jump into this last question that I have for you. So I was doing a little bit of research. In 2010, there were about 431,000 seniors aged 60 and older residing in what's called Planning Service Area 4, which is the service area that ElderSource oversees. And so that includes 7 counties: Baker, Clay, Duval, Flagler, Nassau, St. Johns, and Volusia. So about 431,000 seniors in 2010. In 2023, there were 615,000 seniors in the age demographic. So on average, this is an increase of about 14,000 seniors per year coming into PSA 4. And the fact is, it's just going to continue to grow because more and more people are continuing to come to the state of Florida. So how is ElderSource preparing for the population growth to ensure as many seniors as possible receive those services?
So we are required by the state to complete what we call an area plan, where we identify the needs of those older adults, and then we figure out various plans, tactics, strategies to meet those needs. So obviously there's a lot of interesting news going on with the current administration, and as I mentioned, we are funded by the Older Americans Act. So one of the things that's happening at the state, at the national level, which our CEO, Linda Levin, sits on the national board, is coming up with a strategy to make sure that the Older Americans Act is reauthorized. Right now, funding is carrying us through to the end of the year, but as you know, things change quickly. So we are looking to make sure that the information and messages that we get out to the community is understanding, to have people understand the value and the importance of the Area Agency on Aging in meeting the needs of the growing older population. So, understanding that, the platform that they're working on is, make America healthy again. So guess what? Food is medicine. Think about that. Caregiver support, which is huge, ensures that your loved one stays out of a nursing home, which, of course, as you know, is very expensive, and caring from the home. So that is being accountable to the funding that is given to the area agencies on aging to keep people in their homes. So when you look at all these things together, we are aligning ourselves with the fact that we are being very fiscally responsible with the funding that we get, but we need that funding, and we need that the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act to happen. So that's what's happening at the national level with the area agencies on aging and all the other organizations that support the the aging industry. That they are making sure that our voice is heard within Congress. So. That's how it fits into the big piece, that even here in St. Johns County, we are obviously affected by what's happening at the national level, and looking to supporting your Council on Aging and looking to support ElderSource and tapping into those resources and speaking to the people in the community and saying, what, this is so important. You look at the growth, again, of the population. It's huge.
And the Older Americans Act is up for reauthorization, right? And I think... So September-ish?
Well, it is. So without getting too complicated, it was close to being reauthorized last fall. And then, with the new administration. So it's being reexamined. And what they're wanting to do is to just have it be reauthorized as is with maybe some tweaks, but as opposed to starting over from the beginning. So this was established in 1965 for the sole purpose of helping communities keep supporting the services for populations and their aging, the aging populations in their community. So it's super, super important.
Yeah, so I think what listeners can do to show support is to call their legislators and say, hey, we support the Older Americans Act. We want this to continue on so that our seniors continue to benefit from the services and programs that this money provides.
Right. And it boils down to those Meals on Wheels, to the food stamp benefits that so many seniors rely on, keeping those things in place for, again, to age with independence and dignity and gracefully and healthily.
Yeah. All right. Well, that music means it's time for our show to end. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, everybody. We'll see you here next week, same time, same place.